Hey guys, welcome to the video, welcome to the channel, welcome to my basement. What we're going to be working on in this video is the spindle that I've been working on. We are going to build one. What I'm going to do from here on out is in the video description, I'm going to give you a link for a file in my Google Drive called Downloads. In that file is going to have all of my files that you guys can download and do whatever the hell you want to. I highly recommend the very first thing that you do just to get kind of acclimated with what you want to make is print off the designs, cut them out, and make yourself a prototype out of 1/4-inch fiberboard that you can get at Target or Walmart or whatever. This is extremely helpful. So let's assume at this point that you guys have printed out the files. However you did it, you now have them and they're full scale. So you'll have this, which is the spindle face. Same thing with this, is called the spindle side profile. You'll need to cut that out, put that together, and then the piece next to it here, that's this piece on the back. These are, I think I call these steering plates upper and lower, and they are different, so you'll need both of those. This is the caliper bracket. These are just really rough shapes just to get you started, and that's this piece here and this piece here. So the first thing, once you have that and you've made multiple copies so that you have a lot of these to play with, the first thing you're going to want to do is cut them out and label them as, what I did is 1:1 or 100% or whatever. These are going to be your full size templates. Now, I don't know exactly how you're going to cut this out, but the way that I did it is I cut it out with a handheld plasma cutter. This is 1/4-inch masonite, and what I did is I cut these pieces out and I spray adhesived them onto the masonite, and then I sprayed the back and the sides with black high temperature barbecue grill paint because that helps the wood from burning when you're running the plasma cutter along the edge. Now I'm going to assume that you guys have printed out the templates, cut out the templates, plasma cut your pieces, and put in your holes. So we're going to start with what I'm calling the spindle face. We're assuming that you've properly laid out these holes and you've hogged out this hole to fit around the hub assembly. Now what I did is when I cut this with a plasma cutter, I had it set up so that it cut the hole a little bit smaller, and then I just brought it over to my drum sander here, and I would just go around and around and around, just over and over and over, bit by bit, because that gives you a really nice hole. So you need it so that it fits around this ring, and all 4 of your bolts go up through there, and hopefully you can do that without too much slop. But here's one thing that's going to happen is when we weld this, when we throw all of that heat at this, the entire thing is going to shrink a little bit. So once we get this all welded up, you're going to have to open this back up a little bit, but I'll show you that when we do that. If you look, there's a little tiny lip on the mating surface for this hub assembly, and it would be nice if we could just machine a little bit out of there, but I don't have a mill that I can do that. So what I did on this one, which worked out just fine, and we'll go out in the garage and do that to this one, is I just ground a little bit like a 45-degree chamfer all the way around the hole, just enough so that when this goes on there, you've taken out enough material that it misses that little flange. So now that I've got this chamfered and it fits on there very good, I'm just going to take this over to my drum sander, and I'm just going to clean up these edges just so that I've got basically just a nice finished product to work with. Now I got this piece all cleaned up. It's looking good. The next step on this piece is to break this up here to match the side plates, but I'm not going to do that yet. What I need to do next is I need to clean up these side plates, and I need to square everything up. I'm going to vice grip these together, and I'm going to put them on the sanders, and I'm going to make them exactly the same shape. Okay, so now we've got these all cleaned up. I haven't chamfered any edges or anything, but you can see these are all cleaned up. I didn't clean up in here because you don't really need to. These are all straight, and these are all beveled, and I did that with these two pieces clamped together so they're basically identical to each other. And I mean, you can see how flat those are now. This just works completely to our advantage now as we try and square everything up here. The fact that all these are square to each other and to the other pieces is just going to make everything a lot easier to work with. So next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually make this bend so that this piece comes up and meets with those. And I'm going to make that break line right as this radius starts coming up through here. You can see how it starts curving up here. That's exactly how I did it on this one. Okay, so I've done a couple steps that I didn't video, just so that this video doesn't end up being 2 hours long. But let me go over it with you real quick. The last thing that you guys saw was me bending this up. Actually, the first thing that you saw me do was bend it the wrong way. And then I flattened it out and bent it back the other way. And I do stuff like that all the time. So if you do it, don't sweat it. With as careful as we're trying to be, you're still always going to make some little mistakes like that. Sometimes you'll have to scrap the piece and start over. Sometimes you got lucky, like I did, and I was able to just turn that back the other way and turn it around. Then I took my side plates outside and I beveled all of the edges that I'm going to be outside tacking. So I beveled that. This is where the ball cup is going to go. I beveled that so that I could get some good deep penetration in there. I beveled the edge where that's going to go there. I beveled that edge. And then I cleaned up all the edges that are going to get welded, because this is just cheap hot rolled steel and it's got this mill scale on it. And in some applications that doesn't really matter, but in a situation like this where we're trying to make something really, really strong and we want really good welds with good penetration, you need to grind all that stuff out so that you're just working with raw metal. That way when you weld this, it'll be cleaner and stronger. So I've got this mocked up here. This is essentially how I want it. Going to have the ball cups that go on something like that, and then this piece will go up top. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this and this up to the garage. I'm going to take my grinder and I'm going to grind away the mill scale right through here so that I can tack onto here. I'm going to square everything up and I'm going to center this, and then I'm going to give it a tack here, a tack there, same on the other side, and I'm going to tack this in place. I'm not going to tack these on yet. Then when I have all this tacked in place, then I'll come back down here and I'll start working on the steering arms. So now I've got my part here, and you just watched me tack this together. It came out really good. As you could see, hopefully you could see from the video clips, I spent a lot of effort when I was setting that up, making sure that it was equal distance from the holes to here, so that this is going right down the center, and that this is square. And it's almost perfectly square. It did. It's a little bit less on one side, but that's not going to be a problem. The ends where the ball cups go ended up really nice. I did, once I have it welded, tacked in place, then with my grinder, I kind of grind this the top and bottom pieces so that they meet up. So what I'm going to do is, using my templates, my grinders, I'm going to square up all of these edges. Then I'm going to bolt these together, and I'm going to make sure that they are like their radiuses around the top here are exactly the same, just with the drum sander over there, not the drum sander, the disc sander. I'm going to make these exactly the same. They are different. There is a top and a bottom, so I won't make any real changes there, but everything else I will, like this top edge here, I'll make those all exactly the same. So now what we have are our steering arms. I did what I said. I cleaned all this up so that essentially exactly the same. I also took these out and I have ground around the edges to get away that mill scale that's going to be in the way while I weld it. I did that now, and I also beveled this edge and this edge just so that when those are kind of butt welds there, I've got some room where I can get in there and actually get some good penetration. I did that to both of them. So these are very close to being ready to be tack welded in place. I have my high misalignment spacers, and I have my Heim that I'm going to be using as my steering arm. And the first thing that we want to do is take your bolt, put it through, and bolt your Heim in place. Now the reason that you've done that is so that we can make sure that when we were... Ooh, that's a tight Heim. Dang. We want to make sure that when we removed material from the radius here, we didn't take too much that it's going to interfere with our Heim. You can just take a straight edge and just hold it up to the edge there. And you'll see that when we wrap the backside of this arm, it's going to give us enough room for the Heim. So that's exactly what we were looking for. We're very close so that it'll be nice and strong, but there's at least an 1/8 inch, probably 3/16 of room of clearance around that Heim. So that's good. So the next thing that we're going to do, if we just bolted this together like this, when we welded it, because when we weld this, we're going to throw so much heat at it that everything's going to shrink a little bit. What would happen is this would shrink. You would pull this bolt out, and these misalignment spacers would stay in there rock solid. They would be in there super tight because all of this metal is going to shrink and it would close up and bite in on those. So what we're going to do, what I'm going to do, I've got two little thin spacers here. I'll put this bolt in here. I'm going to put these spacers on there. Hold this down. The top portion of this is flat, so you can hold this down on a surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select where this needs to go, and then with my paint pen I'm just going to mark right up above here, and then I'm going to bring this up to the garage and I'm going to tack that. Now I've got this all tacked up. That went well. Everything stayed nice and true. I've got plenty of room on my bolt holes. This is at a 90. Next step then is we need to take these two pieces. This one goes right here. It just gives us a little bit more strength, and it's hollowed out here so that there's plenty of room for your Heim to pivot in there. Because we have this little knockdown here, I'm going to mark a line from here to there, and I'm just going to take it and break it down so that it fits right in there. This, and then from here to here. Okay, that'll work for that. This one's a little bit more complex. Yeah, I already have this bent up. Let me show you how I did that. I just took a piece of tubing that I had that was close to that radius. And I clamped the piece of metal in there. Obviously, before this was rolled, it went straight up. And then I just bent it down and kind of worked it a little bit, going back and forth between the two. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go up to the garage. I'm going to tack weld these pieces on, the pieces that I just made. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up to start final welding this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the cup on one side at a time. And I'm going to tack it lightly in place. Once I get up to here, this will already be tacked. The ball cup will also have this this slug in here. You need to have this slug in here when you weld these, because when you heat this up, it's going to distort a little bit. This slug will make it hold its shape for the most part, and then it's going to be so hot and heated up that it's going to be really easy for me to just lay a bead all the way around. And I'm going to be real careful. I'm going to get it as deep as I can, but I'm not going to let it melt down into the cup. So here is the spindle. Now it's all welded up solid. I think everything came out really good. I'm quite pleased with it. I think it's going to be very strong, and I think it's looks exactly like its brother. But we still got more work to do. If you remember, I told you that when we weld this up and we throw all the heat at it, it's most likely not going to fit on the hub anymore, because when we throw all this heat at it, this whole thing shrinks a little bit. And that's true. It no longer fits over here. It's actually not even really all that close. That always amazes me. I find it hard to believe that when you heat these up and they get that hot, they actually, I don't know, they shrink, whatever. But either way, so we need to open that up a little bit more. I already took my Heims out of here with the spacers. The spacers did work, because these now, they go in there pretty good. They've got a little bit of free play, and when I put a bolt in there, it doesn't take much to tighten it down, and then it pinches it in there. So that turned out really well. That was 2 very thin washers that I put in there. So we need to put the caliper bracket on. Here's my caliper. I made the bracket in a previous video. It's going to go something like this. But before we do that, I need to open this hole up again so that it fits onto the hub. Alright, now I got it cleaned out, and now it fits over there again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assemble this. I'm going to put the rotor on, and then I'm going to show you how I prep the caliper to center it on the rotor, and then we'll weld that on there. So what I've done so far, I've got my caliper here. I've got the caliper bracket bolted onto it. I've taken the width of my caliper. I've taken the width of the rotor, and that essentially gives me almost exactly 1/8 of an inch on the top and the bottom. It's a little bit less. When the caliper's on here, you can't fit a piece of 1/8 inch like this on the top and the bottom. You can almost get it on the bottom, but it's really, really close. So what I'm doing is I'm setting the caliper up here. I don't have pads in it yet. I set it on this piece of 1/8 inch metal, and that essentially centers it. So if I go like this and set it on that piece, it's almost right in the center there. It makes my distances on the top and the bottom almost exactly the same. I'm going to need to determine how far away and where to set up this bracket, but what I need to do, I've got a way to hold the caliper up, but I need to figure out how to hold it off of the rotor a little bit. And here's what I did on the other one, and it worked out pretty well. It seems crazy crude, but it's what I did, and it worked. I take 5 layers of duct tape, and I put it inside this groove and inside this groove, and that gives me a pretty thick base, and then I can push the caliper up tight to the rotor, and the duct tape holds it away. Now, you'll most likely need to trim this a little bit. I already trimmed it. You just keep kind of trimming it back until you have it so that it almost touches. I'm going to set this weight on here. That just causes the caliper to lay really flat on the rotor. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go upstairs to where out in the garage with the TIG welder, and I'm just going to tack this probably in 3 places with this mocked up just like this, and then I'll take it apart and I'll get some tacks on the back side, and I'll reassemble it to make sure that everything didn't move, and then I'll solid weld it on both sides. So guys, that's it. The spindle is done. I'm very happy with the way this one turned out. Of course, it turned out a little bit better than this one, but that makes sense because every time you build one, it gets a little bit better. Everything worked out well with the caliper. The bracket is real nice. My clearances are really good. So this is done. The only thing that I'm going to point out is there have been some comments on my Instagram. There have been some comments on Instagram that this portion here will collect water, which it would. I can't argue with that. So what I'm going to do on both of these is I'm going to drill probably about a 1/4 inch hole right here and a 1/4 inch hole right here, just so that if some water does get in there, it does have the ability to drain out. And I'm also, when I paint these, I'm going to I'll run tape over all of these holes so I can seal it up, and I'll actually pour some paint in there and kind of slosh it around so that paint can actually get in there and kind of seep into the inside of the weld seams and try and protect some of that. So you guys can check the description for, I'll have some information and a link for the designs for this. If you want to go ahead and grab it and make it. Maybe you'll just make the template. Maybe you'll actually make a spindle. Maybe you'll improve on the design. I'm sharing the design with you, but remember, I'm just some dude tinkering around in his garage in his basement, so there's probably many flaws with this, but I do think that this is going to be a very strong, and if you make it yourself and you just use these Toyota 4Runner hubs, I think it's going to be very strong for a very economical price. So either way, guys, I hope this helps you if you do decide to make these. If you have any questions or anything, go ahead and hit me up in the comments or via email. And I hope this is motivating you to work on your own projects. And thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Take care.